Hey there. Ready to dive into something fascinating today? We're cracking open Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics.
Oh, Nicomachean ethics. Always a fun one.
Right, but don't worry, we're not going full philosophy professor on you.
No long lectures.
No way. Today is all about cracking the code of a good life. You know, what did Aristotle think happiness really meant?
And more importantly, what might those ideas mean for, well, for you?
Exactly, and what's really cool is how Aristotle, he approaches this whole thing like a blueprint.
A blueprint.
Yeah, like he lays out a method for figuring this out instead of just, I don't know, like telling us what he thinks.
That's interesting.
It is interesting. So he starts by saying we need criteria, kind of like how a detective needs clues.
I like that. Okay.
So this ultimate good, what he calls eudaimonia,
Eudaimonia, right.
it has to be like the final goal, not just a stepping stone to something else,
Yeah.
but something that's, good in and of itself.
Inherently valuable.
Yes. Okay, so I'm with him so far. But then how do we even know this whole ultimate good, this eudaimonia, is even like a real thing? It feels kind of abstract.
Well, Aristotle, he argues that everything, every single thing we do, is aiming at some kind of good.
Hmm.
Maybe not always this, capital U ultimate version, but still.
Okay.
So think about, like, why you chose your career.
Oh, okay.
Or who you choose to spend your time with. I mean, there's the desired good
Yeah.
behind those choices,
Well,
right?
true, yeah. I've never really thought about it like that. But okay, even if every action points to some kind of good, how do we know there's like this one ultimate overarching good that they're all kind of leading towards?
Well, that's where things get really, really interesting. Aristotle, he dives into this whole concept of virtues.
Virtues, okay.
Yeah, and remember how he said this ultimate good has to be, like, self-sufficient?
Right.
Well, he believes that virtuous actions, those are the only things we do truly for their own sake, not as a means to an end.
So like if you're being generous, you're not doing it for praise or to get something back. You're being generous just because it feels good to be generous.
Exactly. And Aristotle, he doesn't just, give us a list of virtues and call it a day. He meticulously breaks them down. Courage, generosity, even wit.
Wit.
Yeah. And he explores what these virtues actually look like in everyday situations. Like, what does courage really mean when you're facing, say, a difficult decision at work?
So he's saying a good life, a truly happy life, comes from cultivating these virtues.
That's the core of it. Aristotle believed that living virtuously, that is the most direct path to eudaimonia, to experiencing this true and lasting happiness.
But here's the thing, and maybe this is a bit obvious, but Aristotle tells us what we should be aiming for. But he doesn't exactly give us like step-by-step instructions on how to become virtuous.
You're right. There's no rule book, and that's something people have been grappling with for centuries. It's actually what makes Aristotle's work so fascinating and perhaps a little frustrating.
Okay, so no rule book. But does he give us any clues on how to cultivate these virtues?
Well, he does. He does give us clues. Aristotle, he was big on observation.
Observation, okay.
Yeah, he called them appearances. Basically, this idea that we learn by paying attention to how people actually behave, especially those who are considered, well, wise.
Oh, interesting.
It's like he's encouraging us to be, like ethical detectives ourselves.
So instead of just like reading about virtues,
Yeah.
we need to kind of observe them in action, like an apprenticeship for, for good living or something.
Exactly. It's about developing this sharp sense of, what's right, recognizing that, ethics, they're nuanced. A courageous act in one situation might be totally reckless in another.
Yeah,
There's judgment involved.
it's true. It makes me think about all the different like role models I've had in my life.
Yeah.
Some, they were incredibly generous. Others were like brave in the face of adversity. But it's almost like those experiences, like observing those virtues firsthand, were all kind of data points in my own, I don't know, like ethical development.
So that's a fantastic way to look at it. We are constantly gathering this ethical data, right? Observing others, reflecting on what resonates with us.
Right.
Is a continual process of growth.
And that's what's so cool about Aristotle's work, right? It's not like this one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
It's like a framework, right?
Yeah.
For thinking about ethics that applies to everyone, but differently.
It's true. And remember, Aristotle, he wasn't just writing for the average person on the street,
Well, right.
He was writing for political leaders,
Right. Wow. Okay.
for people who, had to make really tough calls with huge consequences.
That makes a lot of sense. Like leading a team or a company or a whole country even, it's not just about like following a rule book, right? It's about like making judgment calls, often in really difficult situations. And that definitely requires a deeper understanding of what these virtues, actually mean in practice.
Precisely. So while Aristotle doesn't, offer a precise set of rules, he provides something arguably more valuable,
Right.
a way of thinking about ethics that helps us navigate, all the complexities of life.
Yeah.
But he doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
He throws a real curveball by introducing this argument from another philosopher, Eudoxus, who believed that pleasure was the ultimate good.
Wait. So just as we think we're getting a handle on this whole virtue thing, we're supposed to consider the idea that it's all about like maximizing pleasure. I mean, it almost seems too simple.
Right.
Yeah.
But Eudoxus, he had an interesting argument. He said we praise things that we think, contribute to something else that's good.
Oh, yeah.
But we don't praise things like God or, the good itself.
Right.
We consider them kind of beyond praise.
So I'm trying to follow. So because we don't praise pleasure, Eudoxus thought it kind of must be on the same level as something like the good, as opposed to something that just brings us pleasure, like a delicious meal, which we do praise.
Yeah, that was Eudoxus's point. He saw the act of praising as an indicator of something striving towards the good, but not being, the ultimate good itself.
Okay, so where does Aristotle land on all this?
Mm-hmm.
Does he like side with Eudoxus and just declare pleasure as like the ultimate pursuit?
Ultimately, no. Aristotle, he believed that happiness, it's far more, enduring and fulfilling than just, fleeting pleasure.
Yeah.
But the fact that he even, brings up Eudoxus's argument at all,
Yeah.
it shows how deeply he considered, like, every angle of this question,
Wow.
even if it meant raising more questions than answers.
So we've explored this whole idea of eudaimonia,
Yeah.
Aristotle's ultimate good.
Right.
And it's not about like, a fleeting pleasure, but a deeper, a more lasting form of happiness. And we talked about how like living virtuously, that's kind of the path to achieving it.
Right.
But I have to ask, like, what does all this mean for us today?
Yeah.
How do we actually apply these ancient Greek ideas to like our modern lives?
Yeah.
Especially without some, clear-cut rule book.
That's the big question, isn't it? And you're right. Aristotle, he doesn't give us like a step-by-step guide,
Yeah.
He gives us something I think arguably more powerful.
What's that?
A framework for thinking.
Okay.
He's pushing us to really examine like our motivations,
Yeah.
our actions, and ultimately the kind of life we're building.
So it's less about like checking off a list of virtues and more about kind of cultivating a certain, I don't know, like a certain character.
Exactly. It's about asking ourselves, like, am I living in a way that aligns with these virtues? Am I being courageous? Am I being generous? Just wise? And these aren't questions with easy answers. They require, some honest self-reflection, a willingness to be challenged.
It's interesting, right? Because our society puts so much emphasis on like what we achieve.
Yeah.
Our careers, our possessions, our status.
Right.
But Aristotle seems to be saying that true happiness, it comes from something much, much deeper.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from like who we are as people.
It's a powerful insight that I think often gets lost, in our kind of fast-paced world. We're just bombarded with all these messages telling us to constantly strive for more, more, more. But Aristotle, he reminds us that true fulfillment, it comes from aligning our actions with our values, with these, these enduring virtues.
And it's not about being perfect, right?
Yeah.
He knew there's no magic formula for like a good life. It's about constantly striving, making choices that align with virtue, even when it's hard.
You've hit the nail on the head. It's a journey,
Yeah.
not a destination. And one of the most, I think, crucial things we can do is surround ourselves with people who, who embody those virtues.
I'm interested.
People who inspire us, who challenge us to grow.
Yeah.
Think about, the people in your own life,
Yeah.
the ones you admire for their courage, their generosity, their wisdom.
Right.
Those relationships are incredibly powerful on this journey towards eudaimonia. That's such a great point. It's like having like ethical mentors, right?
Yeah.
People who can kind of help us see our blind spots,
Yeah.
who encourage us to be our best selves. Maybe that's like one of the most important things we can take away from Aristotle. The power of community,
Community.
of surrounding ourselves with people who inspire us to live, virtuously.
Absolutely. And who we can in turn, inspire as well. It's a reciprocal relationship that enriches everyone involved.
Yeah.
And it contributes to, a better world along the way.
It's like Aristotle is saying, look, you don't have to, figure this out alone.
Right, right.
Find your people, those who share your values,
Yeah.
who embody the virtues you aspire to.
Learn from them, support them, and together create a life and a world a little closer to this ideal of eudaimonia.
Beautifully put. That's the heart of Aristotle's message.
Yeah.
A message that's both timeless and so timely. He
Yeah.
he challenges us to really think critically about what it means to live a good life, both for ourselves and for those around us.
So next time you're like facing a tough decision, remember Aristotle's challenge. What would a virtuous person do in this
Yeah.
situation? And with courage, generosity, justice, and wisdom as your guide, take that next step towards a truly good life.